The cannabis community is a diverse set of people from all walks of life, conservative and liberal, black and white, straight and gay, rich and poor, and everyone in between. Learn more about the people we are freeing from adult marijuana prohibition in our Cannabis Community Chat.
Welcome back, everyone. Half past the hour, and joining me in the chat today, we've got Oliver Steinberg, who's here to talk with us about what's happening in his home state of Minnesota. Oliver, welcome back to the show. How you doing today?
Thanks, Russ. First of all, I want to say my hat is off to the people of Oregon, the people of Alaska, the people of the District of Columbia, and the people of Florida. We're the only state where you can get 58% of the votes and still be called the loser of an election.
Yeah, isn't that strange? I'm glad there's nothing like that in our Constitution.
Well, and what we don't have in the Constitution of the state of Minnesota is the right of the citizens to petition to put the law up for a vote. We, the people in Minnesota, can't vote directly to change the law unless the legislature puts it on the ballot as a constitutional amendment. So where do we have a voice? How can we protest against prohibition? And we've been confronting this dilemma for decades. Back in 1986, we figured the way to do it is just to run people for office who will use the campaign as a platform to advocate an end to the war on drugs. And so we formed something called the Grassroots Party.
So this is about running electoral candidates whose sole campaign message is about legalization?
Well, that's right. But when you say the sole campaign message, of course, as you know, that message encompasses everything from civil liberties to public safety to economic recovery to planetary restoration. It has to do with health care. It has to do with the curse of mass incarceration. It has to do with identifying and dismantling what Michelle Alexander calls the new Jim Crow, you know, the redesign of racial caste in this country, for-profit prison system, and the so-called market for prisoners that drives that. So, the root of all these evils is prohibition, which has created this narco-police state, and we need people running for office and using the election process to articulate that, to get that message out, to show these connections to people who are going to have a choice when they vote, and they won't be able to vote in Minnesota and lots of other states that don't allow the ballot initiative process. But we do have a mechanism where our voice can be heard and the issue can be raised.
So you say you've been doing this for a while now. What was the result in 2014 of running these Grassroots Party candidates?
Well, this year we sensed that there was an opportunity. And when we started the Grassroots Party in '86, everybody understood as a little play on words there. Grass, that's weed, that's pot. You smoke it, you get high.
Yeah.
And grassroots, are the people in politics who are furthest from the center of power. So now in this century, nobody realizes that grass is a synonym for pot. So we thought, well, we will put it on the ballot. We'll do a plebiscite by proxy. We'll put the words legalize cannabis and legalize marijuana directly on the ballot as the name of the party that our candidates stand for, and it worked. We don't have an organization worth calling an organization. We don't have a campaign fund, and we don't have a whole lot of volunteers, but we have the power of an idea whose time is coming. And on Tuesday in Minnesota, one of our candidates is on the ballot with the word legal marijuana now next to his name. 3 little words. Got 60,000 votes. Well, he got 57,000 plus, almost 60,000 votes in a low turnout year. Not enough to win the election, but enough to come in third in a 6-way race and show up on the television screens all night. There's the Republican, there's the Democrat, and there's the legal marijuana candidate, and what the heck? He's coming in with all those votes. It worked.
That's great. So a much better result with having these Grassroots Party people on than you'd seen in previous elections, I suppose.
Well, that's right. 4 years ago, our candidate for governor, Chris Wright, who's been a veteran cannabis activist, an old friend of Jack Harris, Chris got 7,500 votes 4 years ago. Now, now that it's in the BC area, or I should say rather the AC, after Colorado era, Chris got over 31,000 votes, over 4 times, quadrupling the vote that he got. And if we'd had a little press coverage, if we'd had a little campaign budget, he did make some. We made a few ads. We had some radio ads, some TV ads, a little bit of internet advertising, but compared to the corporate candidates, we were not really visible in the to the same extent that other candidates were.
Still, I think
go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's really clever running, doing what you can to get this on the ballot, and seeing these protest votes come out that should give some, guidance to the politicians out there that there's an untapped market of marijuana supporters that they could reach out to.
Well, this is always what independent and minor party candidates have done historically, is we test drive an issue or reforms that are too controversial according to conventional political thinking. Politicians tend to be conformists. They're all aiming for the middle of the road, where Jim Hightower said you'll find yellow stripe and dead armadillos. But the idea of doing this, of running candidates where you can't put the law itself on the ballot, putting the law on the ballot so people can vote for it shows a couple of things. First of all, the people are way ahead of the politicians when it comes to cannabis reform. And let's look back in 1996. That's the year that Proposition 215 was put on the ballot in California. It was the idea that came originally from Dennis Perone, who had pioneered it in San Francisco with Proposition P. Then they went statewide. So in 1996, that proposition for medical marijuana in California passed. It actually got more votes in that state than Clinton did, and Clinton carried the state. Well, in 96 in Minnesota, since we can't put the law up for a vote, but we want the issue to be heard in the election, we put Dennis Perone on the ballot as a presidential candidate. He didn't get a lot of votes, 4,000 or 5,000 votes, but we were heard. We were there. We gave people the choice, and this whole idea was pioneered by Gatewood Galbraith.
Oh, yeah.
You remember Gatewood?
Oh, the late great Gatewood Galbraith. What a fantastic man. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. You might call him Gateway Galbraith, because back in the 80s, he was running for governor of Kentucky as the pro-hemp, pro-legal cannabis candidate. And he did it over and over again, and he never won. But the more he did it, the longer he did it, people came to respect what he stood for and what he was telling people and the message that he could get out by doing that. And this is certainly the option that people in the non-initiative states should be looking for. And I know when Gatewood passed, we lost an inspiring leader.
Yeah. And he was a guest on our show, and I was proud to be able to interview him before he passed. Now, Oliver, also speaking of Minnesota, another fight you've got going on there is medical marijuana. I know your governor, Mark Dayton, has been a huge roadblock in this respect. How did the gubernatorial race shake out?
Well, now that's an interesting thing, too, because our candidate for lieutenant governor is David Daniels. He's a Rasta poet and playwright, and he himself is a cancer survivor. He had stage 4 lymphoma a few years ago. He used to live in Colorado and went back there. In fact, in Colorado, he had worked with Ken Gorman, another legendary cannabis activist. So David went back to Colorado, used concentrated cannabis extracts to treat his disease, and he's in remission now. He's back here. He's a candidate. Now, there's a story. Here's a guy who's a survivor and a cannabis patient, cannabis therapy patient, who was running against Mark Dayton, the obstructionist who blocked the MPP medical bill here. But the news people wouldn't pick up that story. And when we tried to, we obviously thought this would be a dramatic contrast and, a way to raise the issue. Because people are still suffering, people are still in need, and the medical bill, that so-called medical bill that Dayton and the Police Federation jammed through the legislature as a space-saving device. It was a cynical political placebo. It was not a law designed to work, but rather just to shut people up. Well, since that law was passed, now at this present time, there's at least 3 different patients or parents in this state who are facing court charges for illegal use of cannabis for medicine. We have MPP promising to come back and go to the legislature again and plead and cajole and bargain and lobby to try to get them to pass once more a broader version of the MPP medical bill, which is still a very limited one, which still leaves many patients and their caregivers criminalized, because it defines certain conditions as covered and others as not covered. And David Daniels, our lieutenant governor candidate, a cancer patient, would not have been covered under the existing proposed medical cannabis, the existing 2014 bogus medical bill here, because cancer patients can get their cannabis extract under that program for treating pain or the side effects of chemotherapy, but not for directly treating the disease itself, which in fact is what he did.
Well, Oliver, thank you for your perspective on Minnesota. We'll keep an eye up there and help you guys as much as we can. It's a state with a lot of progressive history. There's no reason it shouldn't be moving forward on marijuana issues like the rest of the states are. Before I let you go, any links or blogs that you need to promote before we move on to the next segment?
Well, I'd like people just to go on Facebook and look at Legal Marijuana Now, and also on Facebook they can look for the Right Daniel